Our scripture reading from today comes from Luke chapter 20, verses 27 through 38. Another group came to test him, this time from the Sadducees, a rival party of the Pharisees, who believe that there is no resurrection. Per the Sadducees, "Teacher, Moses wrote in the Hebrew scriptures that a man must marry his brother's wife, and the new couple should bear children for his brother if his brother dies without heirs. Well, once there were 7 brothers, and the first took a wife and then died without fathering children. The second took her as his wife, and then he died childless. And then the third, and so on through the 7. They all died, leaving no children. Finally, the woman died too. Here's our question. In the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Since all 7 had her for a while, will she be the wife of 7 men at once?" Jesus says, "The children of this era marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain the resurrection of the dead in the coming era do not marry and are not given in marriage. They are beyond mortality. They are on the level of heavenly messengers. They are children of God and children of the resurrection. Since you brought up the issue of resurrection, even Moses made clear in the passage about the burning bush that the dead are, in fact, raised. After all, he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. By Moses' time, they were all dead, but God isn't God of the dead, but of the living. So all live to God. May God add blessing to the reading, hearing, and living of these words. Amen.
Thank you, Karen. I'll admit that this gospel lesson is a bit strange, maybe even a little goofy. We had read the part just before this. Jesus had just gotten done with a back and forth with, let's see the groups, with the chief priests, and then with the elders, and then with the religious scholars. And now, here come the Sadducees. It reminds me of just about any and every, action movie or fantasy TV show or sci-fi, where anytime there's a battle, it always feels like the protagonist is surrounded by all of these groups, right? But somehow, in the midst of it, it's always like a one-on-one battle or one-on-two. Doesn't even matter how big the army is, it always comes down to this one-on-one battle in the middle. That's kind of like what's happening with Jesus. All these different groups are coming at him, and he sort of ends up taking them on one at a time. And so this last time, what we just read, the Sadducees approach. The text tells us a little bit about who that group is. They were wealthy landowners in the city of Jerusalem. In other words, they were doing just fine by the status quo. What do we know about folks that are doing just fine in the status quo? They want it to stay the same. Right? They're going to reject and resist any attempts to change that. And we also know, according to the text, they were rivals of the Pharisees, and yet here they are kind of joining forces, again, like that band of evildoers that are attacking our protagonists. Like they're putting aside their differences and coming at Jesus. And so they ask this convoluted question. It's kind of like hypothetical. This is like, any of your late night conversations that you had in a dorm room or, maybe in a pub over a pint where you end up, somebody always takes the conversation to its like ridiculous hypothetical end. Like that's what the Sadducees are doing here. They ask Jesus about this levirate marriage. Now, what was that about? Well, really, it was about protecting vulnerable people. See, a childless woman in Jesus' day who becomes a widow was extremely vulnerable. And so this levirate marriage law said that, if the woman dies childless, then the brother of her husband has to marry her. How many of you are excited that that's not how we do things today? But the idea there is that then as now we know that when a social safety net is non-existent, people get hurt. And this law was meant to help provide that. It was meant to help provide for vulnerable women. Much better to have her folded into her brother-in-law's house and family than have her begging on the streets. Because then as now, we know communities are better and stronger with a strong social safety net. When people are cared for, the whole community is better. So that's the idea behind it. But the Sadducees, they come in and they kind of want to mock this idea of resurrection. The text tells us the one thing we know about what they believe is that they don't believe in resurrection. And yet they're posing this hypothetical wherein they do. They kind of mock this idea. Well, Jesus, just imagine this poor woman who, her husband dies, and so then she marries a brother, and he dies, and it goes through 7 different times. Jesus, of course, is having none of it. He sees through their trap and the flaw in their question. And so he says to them, essentially, look, when relationships are set rightly and justly, no one, including your hypothetical widow, no one is property. No one is property. Oh, and by the way, Jesus says, none of them are really dead because all continue to live in God. Wait, what? Jesus, I think you buried the lead here. None of them are actually dead. They all continue to live in God. That seems like kind of an important piece of information, doesn't it? That seems like the kind of thing we want to know. Anyone would want to know. Friends, as our time together continues, you will hear me say some version of this with some frequency. Whatever the experience is for those who have died, whatever that, for them, whatever that looks like, whatever it feels like, whatever it sounds like, whatever it smells like, I cannot say. But I'm convinced that all those we have loved and lost continue to live in God's love. I'm convinced that all those we have loved and lost continue to live in God's love. That's what I hear Jesus saying in this gospel lesson today. And not for nothing, but I'd say this text reinforces my conviction that if there is a hell, it is empty because all live in the love of God. That's the sort of God that we follow. One who says all continue to live in that love. And besides, my goodness, this woman had what? Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 5, but 7 different dudes for husbands? Like, that's not hell enough on earth for anybody? This gospel story, it seems to me, speaks of legacy. And that's what All Saints Day is all about, is this idea of legacy. What is the legacy we have received, and what legacy will we carry on? And as happens sometimes in sermon prep, we get kept running into different situations and folks that seem to be talking and thinking about this idea of legacy. Who we have been and who we are called to be. To quote the song that inspired the sermon title, who lives, who dies, who tells your story? I hope by now you've all seen the musical Hamilton, or at least have listened to it. If not, you need to do yourself a favor and do that. I mean, it's available on, even the movie of it is great. It's not like a movie of the show. It's a movie of the show. It's, anyway. You need to do it. It's on Disney Plus. You can get, I'm sure there's a free 7-day trial, or 3-hour trial, 3-hour tour of Disney Plus. It won't end in destruction, I promise. Anyway, you need to see it. It's so inspiring. Here's what creator Lin-Manuel Miranda writes about it. We all dream that when we pass on, the people we love are going to keep us alive in some way, talking about us or keeping our picture up. We tell stories of people who are gone because, like any powerful stories, They have the potential to inspire. Stories have the potential to change the world, he wrote. Again, the song, when you're gone, who remembers your name? Who keeps your flame? Who tells your story? The truth is, we have not very much control over our legacy, over how others will remember us, but we can do our level best to leave a legacy of courageous compassion and loving service. So far, what are the stories that we've received? What are the stories that we keep alive in this community of faith? You know, the United Methodist Church was founded in, anybody know? 18. Right? That's right, you're right, yes. 1856. Those first services were held in a storefront and later in a school. The first church was built in 1866 and has been located at the corner of Church and Massasoit Streets since that time. When the original church was destroyed by a tornado in 1917, that's correct. A new sanctuary was built. That 1917 building was remodeled and enlarged during, anybody know, 1981 and 82. Our congregation continues to grow, and while most of our members are United Methodist background, we have many members from many different faiths. The church serves in the Minooka area and surrounding cities. We broke new ground on the new home of Minooka United Methodist Church in May, Average Road. That's the story that we present to the world on our website. Now, it's interesting to me, as a relative newcomer, that it seems to be focused quite a lot on building, on the where we are. Now, I know we're anxious and excited and can't wait for this new chapter to get into Ridge Road, to truly and fully begin that new chapter. But friends, I'm going to suggest to you today that once we are there, we need to focus much less on the where and turn our attention to the who and the how. Why. And the why, yes, why is a good thing too. Yeah, all those questions are good ones to ask. We've settled the where. Let's turn our attention to the who and the with whom and the why. Another place that I experienced some connection to legacy. Last night, Joanne and I were invited by our friends Leo and Grace to join them at the Marine Ball in Naperville. Our friend Leo was a Marine who served in Kuwait during the First Gulf War and is currently the commander of the Naperville VFW. And we're connected to our daughters and we've become friends over the last few years. I will tell you that our family doesn't have a strong military history. Joanne's dad was in the Army in the 60s, and my maternal grandfather, the story goes, lied about his age so that he could enlist in the Army at 17 and during World War I, and ended up apparently tending some horses in France. But that was a long time ago. He died long before I was born, and there's not that real strong connection. No one else in my family has ever served. So being at the ball, this was our second year getting to go with him, but those two times, it's been a very interesting, eye-opening, enlightening, inspiring experience to get to be part of that Marine Corps birthday ball. I was surprised to find myself saying to Joanne, I think the church could learn some things from the Marine Corps. And in a lot of ways, it reminded me of All Saints Day. The Sergeant Major, who was the guest speaker, shared things like inspiring stories of those who had died in the last year and those that had died over the years. Some in duty and some in retirement. They acknowledged that everyone thinks their time was the best time, and those who come after them had it easy and weren't as good at it. And then he said, but the heart of the Marine Corps is love. We love each other. my friend Neil leaned over and he said to me, whisper he heard over the din of the crowd in the banquet hall, and he said, Dave, once you're in the core together, creed, religion, race, politics, none of it matters. We're in this together. We're a family. An idea of found family is one we're trying to lean into and trying to learn. Friends, I think the church could learn perhaps from the Marine Corps. Later, as I looked around our table, our two tables included folks that were black and white and brown and Asian. As I looked around at the other tables and at the dance floor, couples, singles, single mom, same-sex couples on the dance floor, I had to say to Joanne, oh my goodness, the Marine Corps is more openly inclusive than most of the church. It seems we who follow God in the way of Jesus could learn from the Marine Corps, a sentence I never in the world thought I would say, and yet here it is. They're absolutely a found family, just like we are here. So as we consider our legacy, as we consider and strive to create inspiring stories for those who will come after us, about who we've been and who we are trying to be, our questions. Who are we going to be? Now look, here let me tell you a secret. If any Sunday, any day comes along and you're just not feeling it with one of my sermons, my suggestion to you is no, I don't want to say that. My suggestion to you is seek out Heidi Stevens. She's a writer for the Chicago Tribune, and her columns always are aspirational and inspirational and informational, and they're terrific. And if you're just not getting it from the sermon, go read one of her columns because she'll do that. She'll do all those things for you. A bit from not from today, but or one from today is good too, but from a previous column. She was writing about a man named Jason Patera. He's the head of the school at the Chicago Academy for the Arts, who recently had a brain tumor removed. He was a runner. Every day he ran 5 miles. Knowing his surgery would end that streak, the students and staff organized a school-wide run the day before his surgery. And at the end of that course, that running course, they had a box of letters from the kids, letters and cards filled with well wishes and support. And Jason said, I'm reading these letters from kids who've gone through far more challenging things than I went through or likely ever will. And they're offering wisdom and perspective delivered with such kindness and compassion. They're engaging the rest of the world with this kind of kindness and compassion. We're talking about superhero-level empathy. The future, he says, is bright. Because the kids have superhero level of empathy. He goes on, we spend a lot of time helping students understand the power of the word, the power of their words, the power of their presence. Does that sound familiar? We have the chance to make something that's going to shift how someone thinks. And if you get used to the idea that your words and your actions, your works, if they matter, you're more likely to go through life acting as if they do. And they do. They matter. So friends, wherever you find your inspiration today, or tomorrow, or the day after that, be it in the witness of our saints, be it in great art like Hamilton, be it in the inspirational work of the Marines, or in stories of young people, or anything else entirely, remember that anything that adds love and joy and peace and patience to the world is of God. And anything that increases justice for oppressed people, anything that plots goodness in the world is of God. Is of the God we have come to know in Jesus. The God in whom Jesus tells us all the saints continue to live. Seems to me that if we know that and believe it and act like it is true, then our ultimate legacy is secure. There may never be a street named after us, but our ultimate legacy is secure. For we will continue to live with all the saints in the expansive, never-ending love of God. Stevens writes today, to paraphrase, our kids and our neighbors are watching what we model and reaping what we sow. The world they inherit is the one we help create. So it's better, always, to lead with the courage of our convictions rather than the fear of a controversy. What's left, it seems to me, friends, is how is our story told? We can't control who lives, who dies, who tells our story, but we can do our best to leave a glorious legacy, continuing that story we've inherited. A story that began way back in when was it? 56, look at there. You guys are listening. That's awesome. Yes, a story that began way back in 1856 with some courageous people. If we continue to be courageous and compassionate, it could be enough. If we're courageous and compassionate in our faith, in living our baptismal vows to resist injustice and oppression in all their forms, including bigotry and racism, if we vote against authoritarianism and against fear-mongering, if we care for neighbors who are hurting, neighbors who are experiencing hunger and homelessness, it will be enough. Friends, I say we strive to leave a legacy of courageous compassion and serving. What say you, church?
They paid for that new church in 2 years, in 1917.
1917 paid for the church in 2 years. That's a pretty courageous legacy to receive. What say you? Is that a legacy we can continue?
Yes.
Amen.